Greetings, respected guests, and welcome to the Washington Center for the Performing Arts. Over the course of the day, a variety of readers from our local government and community will be reading 30 minutes of materials from the document known as the Mueller Report. Each reader has been asked to present the material without commentary, and transitions between speakers will be very brief. When a reader comes to a section of text that has been redacted, they will indicate so by ringing a bell. Today's event is not intended to be partisan in any way. Sponsors for this event include Ole Arts Magazine, Browser's Books, the Northwest Playwrights Alliance, TC Media, and the Washington Center for the Performing Arts. We hope you find this information useful and enjoyable. Now please welcome our next reader, Amy Shephard.
With no response forthcoming, Forsman twice sent reminders to Graff, first on April 26th and again on April 30th, 2016. Graff sent an apology to Forsman and forwarded his April 26th email, as well as his initial March 2016 email, to Lewandowski. On May 2nd, 2016, Graff forwarded Forsman's April 30th email, which suggested an alternative meeting with Donald Trump Jr. or Eric Trump so that Forsman could convey to them information that should be conveyed to the candidate personally or to someone the candidate absolutely trusts, to policy advisor Stephen Miller. No communications or other evidence obtained by the office indicate that the Trump campaign learned that Forsman was reaching out to invite the candidate to the forum, or that the campaign otherwise followed up with Forsman until after the election, when he interacted with the transition team as he pursued a possible position in the incoming administration. When interviewed by the office, Forsman denied that the specific approach from senior Kremlin officials noted in his March 31st, 2016 email was anything other than Kobyakov's invitation to Ron Congress. According to Forsman, the concrete things he referenced in the same email were a combination of the invitation itself, Forsman's personal perspectives on the invitation, and Russia policy in general, and details of a Ukraine plan supported by a U.S. think tank, East-West Institute. Forsman told the office that Kobyakov had extended similar invitations through him to another Republican presidential candidate and one other politician. Forsman also said that Kobyakov had asked Forsman to invite Trump to speak after that other presidential candidate withdrew from the race, and the other politician's partition did not work out. Finally, Forsman claimed to have no plans to establish a back channel involving Trump, stating the reference to his involvement in the Bush-Putin back channel was meant to burnish his credentials to the campaign. Forsman commented that he had not recognized any of the experts announced as Trump's foreign policy team in March of 2016 and wanted to secure an in-person meeting with the candidate to share his professional background and policy views, including that Trump should decline Kobyakov's invitation to speak at the forum. Number 2, George Papadopoulos. George Papadopoulos was a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign from March 2016 to early October 2016. In late April 2016, Papadopoulos was told by London-based professor Joseph Misford, immediately after Misford's return from a trip to Moscow, that the Russian government had obtained dirt on candidate Clinton in the form of thousands of emails. 1 week later, on May 6, 2016, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information that would be damaging to candidate Clinton. Papadopoulos shared information about the Russian dirt with people outside of the campaign, and the office investigated whether he also provided it to a campaign official. Papadopoulos and the campaign officials with whom he interacted told the office that they did not recall that Papadopoulos passed them the information. Throughout the relevant period of time, and for several months thereafter, Papadopoulos worked with Misford and 2 Russian nationals to arrange a meeting between the campaign and the Russian government. That meeting never came to pass. A. Origins of campaign work. In March 2016, Papadopoulos became a foreign policy advisor to the Trump campaign. As early as the summer of 2015, he had sought a role as a policy advisor to the campaign, but in a September 30th, 2015 email, he was told that the campaign was not hiring policy advisors. In late 2015, Papadopoulos obtained a paid position on the campaign of Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson. Although Carson remained in the presidential race until early March 2016, Papadopoulos had stopped actively working for his campaign by early February 2016. At that time, Papadopoulos reached out to a contact at the London Centre of International Law Practice, which billed itself as a unique institution, comprising high-level professional international law practitioners, dedicated to the advancement of a global legal knowledge and the practice of international law. Papadopoulos said that he had finished his role with the Carson campaign and asked if LCILP was hiring. In early February, Papadopoulos agreed to join the LCILP and arrived in London to begin work. As he was taking his position at LCILP, Papadopoulos contacted Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski via LinkedIn and emailed campaign official Michael Glassner about his interest in joining the Trump campaign. On March 2, 2016, Papadopoulos sent Glassner another message reiterating his interest. Glassner passed along word of Papadopoulos' interest to another campaign official, Joy Lutz, who notified Papadopoulos by email that she had been told by Glassner to introduce Papadopoulos to Sam Clovis, the Trump campaign's national co-chair and chief policy advisor. At the time of Papadopoulos' March 2nd email, the media was criticizing the Trump campaign for lack of experienced foreign policy or national security advisors within its ranks. To address that issue, senior campaign officials asked Clovis to put a foreign policy team together on short notice. After receiving Papadopoulos' name from Lutz, Clovis performed a Google search on Papadopoulos, learned that he had worked at the Hudson Institute, and believed that he had credibility on energy issues. On March 3, 2016, Clovis arranged to speak with Papadopoulos by phone to discuss Papadopoulos joining the campaign as a foreign policy advisor. And on March 6, 2016, the two spoke. Papadopoulos recalled that Russia was mentioned as a topic, and he understood from the conversation that Russia would be an important aspect of the campaign's foreign policy. At the end of the conversation, Clovis offered Papadopoulos a role as a foreign policy advisor to the campaign, and Papadopoulos accepted the offer. B. Initial Russia-related contacts. Approximately a week after signing on as a foreign policy advisor, Papadopoulos traveled to Rome, Italy, as part of his duties with LCILP. The purpose of the trip was to meet officials affiliated with Link Campus University, a for-profit institution headed by a former Italian government official. During the visit, Papadopoulos was introduced to Joseph Misfud. Misfud is a Maltese national who worked as a professor at the London Academy of Diplomacy in London, England. Although Misfud worked out of London and was also affiliated with LCILP, the encounter in Rome was the first that Papadopoulos met him. Misfud maintained various Russian contacts while living in London, as described further below. Among his contacts was a one-time employee of the IRA. The entity that carried out his contacts was Russian social media campaign. In January and February 2016, Misfud and discussed possibly meeting in Russia. The investigation did not identify evidence of them meeting. Later, in the spring of 2016, was also in contact that was linked to an employee of the Russian Ministry of Defense, and that account had overlapping contacts with a group of Russian military-controlled Facebook accounts that included accounts that used to promote the DC leaks released in the course of the GRU's hack and release operations. See Volume 1, Section 3, B1. According to Papadopoulos, Misfud had at first seemed uninterested in Papadopoulos when they met in Rome. After Papadopoulos informed Misfud about his role in the Trump campaign, however, Misfud appeared to take greater interest in Papadopoulos. The two discussed Misfud's European and Russian contacts and had a general discussion about Russia. Misfud also offered to introduce Papadopoulos to European leaders and others with contacts to the Russian government. Papadopoulos told the office that Misfud's claim of substantial connections with Russian government officials interested in Papadopoulos, who thought that such connections would increase his importance as a policy advisor to the Trump campaign. On March 17, 2016, Papadopoulos returned to London. 4 days later, candidate Trump publicly named him as a member of the Foreign Policy and National Security Advisory Team, chaired by Senator Jeff Sessions, describing Papadopoulos as an oil and energy consultant and an excellent guy. On March 24, 2016, Papadopoulos met with Misfit in London. Misfit was accompanied by a Russian female named Olga Polonskaya. Misfit introduced Polonskaya as a former student of his who had connections to Vladimir Putin. Papadopoulos understood at the time that Polonskaya may have been Putin's niece, but later learned that this was not true. During the meeting, Polonskaya offered to help Papadopoulos establish contacts in Russia and stated the Russian ambassador in London was a friend of hers. Based on this interaction, Papadopoulos expected Misfit and Polonskaya to introduce him to the Russian ambassador in London, but that did not occur. Following his meeting with Misfit, Papadopoulos sent an email to members of the Trump campaign's Foreign Policy Advisory Team. The subject line of the message was, "Meeting with Russian leadership, including Putin." The message stated in pertinent part, "I just finished a very productive lunch with a good friend of mine, Joseph Misfit, and the director of the London Academy of Diplomacy, who introduced me to both Putin's niece and the Russian ambassador in London, who also acts as the deputy foreign minister." The topic of lunch was to arrange a meeting between us and the Russian leadership to discuss U.S.-Russia ties under President Trump. They are keen to host us in a neutral city or directly in Moscow. They said the leadership, including Putin, is ready to meet with us and Mr. Trump should be their interest. Waiting for everyone's thoughts on moving forward with this very important issue. Papadopoulos' message came at a time when Clovis perceived a shift in the campaign's approach toward Russia. From one of engaging with Russia through the NATO network framework and taking a strong stance on the Russian aggression in Ukraine, Clovis's response to Papadopoulos, however, did not reflect that shift. Replying to Papadopoulos and the other members of the Foreign Policy Advisory Team copied on the initial email, Clovis wrote, "This is most informative. Let me work through it. Let me work it through the campaign. No commitments until we see how this plays out. My thought is that we probably should not go forward with any meetings with the Russians until we have had occasion to sit with our NATO allies, especially France, Germany, and Great Britain. We need to reassure our allies that we are not going to advance anything with Russia until we have everyone on the same page. More thoughts later today. Great work." C. March 31st, Foreign Policy Team Meeting. The campaign held a meeting of the Foreign Policy Advisory Team with Senator Sessions and candidate Trump approximately 1 week later on March 31st, 2016 in Washington, D.C. The meeting, which was intended to generate press coverage for the campaign, took place at the Trump International Hotel. Papadopoulos flew to Washington for the event. At the meeting, Senator Sessions sat at one end of an oval table, while Trump sat at the other. As reflected in the photograph below, which was posted to Trump's Instagram account, Papadopoulos sat between the two seats to Sessions' left. During the meeting, each of the newly announced foreign policy advisors introduced themselves and briefly described their areas of experience or expertise. Papadopoulos spoke about his previous work in the energy sector and then brought up a potential meeting with Russian officials. Specifically, Papadopoulos told the group that he had learned through his contacts in London that Putin wanted to meet with candidate Trump and that these connections could help arrange that meeting. Trump and Sessions both reacted to Papadopoulos' statement. Papadopoulos and campaign advisor J.D. Gordon, who told investigators in an interview that he had a crystal clear recollection of the meeting, have stated that Trump was interested in and receptive to the idea of meeting with Putin. Papadopoulos understood Sessions to be similarly supportive of his efforts to arrange a meeting. Gordon and 2 other attendees, however, recall that Sessions generally opposed the proposal, though they differ in their accounts of the concerns he voiced or the strength of the opposition he expressed. D. George Papadopoulos learns that Russia has dirt in the form of Clinton emails. Whatever Sessions' precise words at the March 31st meeting, Papadopoulos did not understand Sessions or anyone else in the Trump campaign to have directed that he refrain from making further efforts to arrange a meeting between the campaign and the Russian government. To the contrary, Papadopoulos told the office that he understood the campaign to be supportive of his efforts to arrange such a meeting. Accordingly, when he returned to London, Papadopoulos resumed those efforts. Throughout April 2016, Papadopoulos continued to correspond with, meet with, and seek Russia contacts through Misfit and at times Polonskaya. For example, within a week of her initial March 24th meeting with him, Polonskaya attempted to send Papadopoulos a text message, which email exchanges show to have been drafted or edited by Misfit, addressing Papadopoulos' wish to engage with the Russian Federation. When Papadopoulos learned from Misfit that Polonskaya had tried to message him, he sent her an email seeking another meeting. Polonskia responded the next day that she was back in St. Petersburg, but would be very pleased to support Papadopoulos' initiatives between our two countries, and to meet him again. Papadopoulos stated in reply that he thought a good step would be to introduce him to the Russian ambassador in London, and that he would like to talk to the ambassador, or anyone else you recommend, about a potential foreign policy trip to Russia. Misfud, who had been copied on the email exchanges, replied on the morning of April 11, 2016. He wrote, "This has already been agreed. I am flying to Moscow on the 18th for a Valdai meeting, plus other meetings at the Duma. We will talk tomorrow." The two bodies referenced by Misfud are part of or associated with the Russian government. The Duma is a Russian legislative assembly, while the Valdai refers to the Valdai Discussion Group, a Moscow-based group that is close to Russia's foreign policy establishment. Papadopoulos thanked Misfud and said that he would see him tomorrow. For her part, Polonskia responded that she had already alerted my personal links to our conversation and your request, that we are all very excited the possibility of a good relationship with Mr. Trump, and that the Russian Federation would love to welcome him once his candidature would be officially announced. Papadopoulos' and Misfud's mention of seeing each other tomorrow referenced a meeting the two had scheduled for the next morning, April 12, 2016, at the Andaz Hotel in London. Papadopoulos acknowledged the meeting during interviews with the office, and records from Papadopoulos' UK cell phone and his internet search history all indicate that the meeting took place. Following the meeting, Misfud traveled as planned to Moscow. On April 18, 2016, while in Russia, Misfud introduced Papadopoulos over email to Ivan Timofeev, a member of the Russian International Affairs Council. Misfud had described Timofeev as having connections with the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the executive entity in Russia responsible for Russian foreign relations. Over the next few weeks, Papadopoulos and Timofeev had met multiple conversations over Skype and email about setting the groundwork for a potential meeting between the campaign and the Russian government officials. Papadopoulos told the office that on one Skype call, he believed that his conversation with Timofeev was being monitored or supervised by an unknown third party, because Timofeev spoke in an official manner and Papadopoulos heard odd noises on the line. Timofeev had also told Papadopoulos in an April 25, 2016 email that he had just spoken to Igor Ivanov, the president of the RIAC and former foreign minister of Russia, and conveyed Ivanov's advice about how best to arrange a Moscow visit. After a stop in Rome, Misfud returned to England on April 25, 2016. The next day, Papadopoulos met Misfud for breakfast at the Andaz Hotel, the same location as their last meeting. During the meeting, Misfud told Papadopoulos that he had met with a high-level Russian government officials during his recent trip to Moscow. Misfud also said that on the trip, he learned that the Russians had obtained dirt on candidate Hillary Clinton. As Papadopoulos later stated to the FBI, Misfud said that the dirt was in the form of emails of Clinton, and that they have thousands of emails. On May 6, 2016, 10 days after the meeting with Misfud, Papadopoulos suggested to a representative of a foreign government that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information that would be damaging to Hillary Clinton. E. Russia-related communications with the campaign. While he was discussing with his foreign contacts a potential meeting of campaign officials with Russian government officials, Papadopoulos kept campaign officials apprised of his efforts. On April 25, 2016, the day before Misfud told Papadopoulos about the emails, Papadopoulos wrote to senior policy advisor Stephen Miller that the Russian government has an open invitation by Putin for Mr. Trump to meet him when he is ready, and that the advantage of being in London is that these governments tend to speak a bit more openly in neutral cities. On April 27, 2016, after his meeting with Misfud, Papadopoulos wrote a second message to Miller stating that some interesting messages were coming in from Moscow about a trip when the time is right. The same day, Papadopoulos sent a similar email to campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, telling Lewandowski that Papadopoulos had been receiving a lot of calls over the last month about Putin wanting to host Trump and the team when the time is right. Papadopoulos' Russia-related communications with campaign officials continued throughout the spring and summer of 2016. On May 4, 2016, he forwarded to Lewandowski an email from Timofeev raising the possibility of a meeting in Moscow, asking Lewandowski whether that was something we want to move forward with. The next day, Papadopoulos forwarded the same Timofeev email to Sam Clovis, adding to the top of the email, Russia update. He included the same email in a May 21, 2016 message to senior campaign official Paul Manafort, under the subject line, request from Russia to meet Mr. Trump, stating that Russia has been eager to meet Mr. Trump for some time and have been reaching out to me to discuss. Manafort forwarded the message to another campaign official without including Papadopoulos and stated, "Let's discuss. We need someone to communicate that Trump is not doing these trips. It should be someone low level in the campaign so as not to send any signal." On June 1st, 2016, Papadopoulos replied to an earlier email chain with Lewandowski about a Russia visit, asking if Lewandowski wanted to have a call about this topic and whether we were following up with it. After Lewandowski told Papadopoulos to connect with Clovis because he was running point, Papadopoulos emailed Clovis that the Russian MFA was asking him if Mr. Trump is interested in visiting Russia at some point. Papadopoulos wrote in an email that he wanted to pass this info along to you for you to decide what's best to do with it and what message I should send or to ignore. After several email and Skype exchanges with Timofeev, Papadopoulos sent one more email to Lewandowski on June 19th, 2016, Lewandowski's last day as campaign manager. The email stated that the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs had contacted him and asked whether, if Mr. Trump could not travel to Russia, a campaign representative such as Papadopoulos could attend the meetings. Papadopoulos told Lewandowski that he was willing to make the trip off the record if it's in the interest of Mr. Trump and the campaign to meet specific people. Following Lewandowski's departure from the campaign, Papadopoulos communicated with Clovis and Walid Fairs, another member of the Foreign Policy Advisory Team, about an off-the-record meeting between the campaign and the Russian government officials, or with Papadopoulos' or other Russian contacts, Misfud and Timofeev. Papadopoulos also interacted directly with Clovis and Fairs in a connection with the summit of the Transatlantic Parliamentary Group on Counterterrorism, TAG, a group for which Fairs was the co-secretary general. On July 16, 2016, Papadopoulos attended the TAG summit in Washington, D.C., where he sat next to Clovis, as reflected in the photograph below. Although Clovis claimed to have no recollection of attending the TAG summit, Papadopoulos remembered discussing Russia and a foreign policy trip with Clovis and Fairs during the event. Papadopoulos' recollection is consistent with emails sent before and after the TAG summit. The pre-summit messages included a July 11, 2016 email in which Fairs suggested a meeting Papadopoulos the day after the summit to chat, and a July 12th message in the same chain in which Fairs advised Papadopoulos that other summit attendees are very nervous about Russia, so be aware. 10 days after the summit, Papadopoulos sent an email to Misfud listing Fairs and Clovis as other participants in a potential meeting at the London Academy of Diplomacy. Finally, Papadopoulos' recollection is also consistent with handwritten notes from a journal that he kept at the time. Those notes, which are reprinted in part below, appeared to refer to a potential September 2016 meetings in London with representatives of the Office of Putin, and suggest that Fairs, Clovis, and Papadopoulos, Walid/Sam, me, would attend without the official backing of the campaign, no official letter / no message from Trump. Later communications indicate that Clovis determined that he, Clovis, could not travel. On August 15, 2016, Papadopoulos emailed Clovis that he had received requests from multiple foreign governments, even Russia, for closed-door workshops / consultations abroad, and asked whether there was still interest for Clovis, Fairs, and Papadopoulos to go on that trip. Clovis copied Fairs on his response, which said that he could not travel before the election, but that he would encourage Papadopoulos and Walid to make the trips if it is feasible. Papadopoulos was dismissed from the Trump campaign in early October 2016 after an interview he gave to the Russian news agency Interfax generated adverse publicity. F. Trump campaign knowledge of dirt. Papadopoulos admitted telling at least one individual outside of the campaign, specifically the then Greek foreign minister, about Russia's obtaining Clinton-related emails. In addition, a different foreign government informed the FBI that 10 days after meeting with Misfud in late April 2016, Papadopoulos suggested that the Trump campaign had received indications from the Russian government that it could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of information that would be damaging to Hillary Clinton. This conversation occurred after the GRU spearphished Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta and stole his emails, and the GRU hacked into the DCCC and the DNC, see Volume 1, Sections 3A and 3B. Such disclosures raised questions about whether Papadopoulos informed any Trump campaign official about the emails. When interviewed, Papadopoulos and the campaign officials who interacted with him told the office that they could not recall Papadopoulos' sharing the information that Russia had obtained dirt on candidate Hillary Clinton in the form of emails, or that Russia could assist the campaign through the anonymous release of the information about Clinton. Papadopoulos stated that he could not clearly recall having told anyone on the campaign and wavered about whether he accurately remembered an incident in which Clovis had been upset after hearing Papadopoulos tell Clovis that Papadopoulos thought they have her emails. The campaign officials who interacted or corresponded with Papadopoulos have similarly stated that with varying degrees of certainty that he did not tell them. Senior policy advisor Stephen Miller, for example, did not remember hearing anything from Papadopoulos or Clovis about Russia having emails of or dirt on candidate Clinton. Clovis stated that he did not recall anyone, including Papadopoulos, having given him non-public information that a foreign government might be in possession of material damaging to Hillary Clinton. No documentary evidence and nothing in the email accounts or other communications facilities reviewed by the office shows that Papadopoulos shared this information with the campaign. G. Additional George Papadopoulos contact. The office investigated another Russia-related contact with Papadopoulos. The office was not fully able to explore the contact because the individual at issue, Sergei Milyan, remained out of the country since the inception of our investigation and declined to meet with members of the office despite our repeated efforts to obtain an interview. Papadopoulos first connected with Milyan via LinkedIn on July 15, 2016, shortly after Papadopoulos had attended the TAG summit with Clovis. Milyan, an Americanized citizen who is a native of Belarus, introduced himself as president of the New York-based Russian-American Chamber of Commerce, and claimed that through the position he had insider knowledge and direct access to top hierarchy in Russian politics. Papadopoulos asked Timofeev whether he had heard of Milyan. Although Timofeev said no, Papadopoulos met Milyan in New York City. The meetings took place on July 30th and August 1st, 2016. Afterwards, Milyan invited Papadopoulos to attend and potentially speak at 2 international energy conferences, including one that was to be held in Moscow in September 2016. Papadopoulos ultimately did not attend either conference. On July 31st, 2016, following his first in-person meeting with Milyan, Papadopoulos emailed Trump campaign official Bo Densik to say that he had been contacted by some leaders of Russian-American voters here in the U.S. about their interest in voting for Mr. Trump, and to ask whether he should put you in touch with their group, U.S.-Russia Chamber of Commerce. Densik thanked Papadopoulos for taking the initiative and asked him to hold off with outreach to the Russian Americans because too many articles had already portrayed the then campaign chairman Paul Manafort, and candidate Trump as being pro-Russian. On August 23, 2016, Milyan sent a Facebook message to Papadopoulos promising that he would share with you a disruptive technology that might be instrumental to your political work for the campaign. Papadopoulos claimed to have no recollection of this matter. On November 9, 2016, shortly after the election, Papadopoulos arranged to meet Milyan in Chicago and to discuss business opportunities, including potential work with Russian billionaires who are not under sanctions. The meeting took place on November 14, 2016, at the Trump Hotel and Tower in Chicago. According to Papadopoulos, the two men discussed partnering on business deals, but Papadopoulos perceived that Milyan's attitude toward him changed when Papadopoulos stated that he was only pursuing private sector opportunities and was not interested in a job at the administration. The two remained in contact, however, and extended online discussions about possible business opportunities in Russia. The two also arranged to meet at a Washington, D.C. bar when they both attended Trump's inauguration in late July 2017.